Part of what makes this night feel so intimate and loving to me is because of our feet and the kindness done to them. Soothing feet was a fairly common thing in my family of origin. Though I did not know it until my 30s, my father was born with a club foot. And treatment in those days was a series of surgeries over time. And so the rest of his life, my dad was very careful about his shoes, and his feet and his ankles would ache in bed at night when he would come home from the golf course. My mom had a different kind of foot difficulty. After she bore us 5 children, the varicose veins in her feet and legs would ache by the end of the day. And so we 3 girls would sometimes take turns massaging her feet and her ankles and her calves as she stretched out on my sister's bed before she tucked them in at night. My feet were fine until I was 40. When I started slipping out of my shoe's heel and turning my foot over and breaking a metatarsal or 2. The first time was a couple of months before my wedding to Mike. Not good timing. The second time was 20 minutes before orientation on my first day of seminary. That was not good timing. The third time was near the end of the first year of seminary, when I was going to have to spend the summer on my feet in the hospital, going to see patients as a student in the chaplaincy program. Eventually, I learned not to wear shoes that could come loose from my heel. And I learned how good a foot massage feels after a day on my feet. It's really wonderful. And so sometime when we were in seminary, my seminary neighbor Maggie was over at our apartment visiting one night. That's Wani, and I was sitting at one end of the love seat, and Michael was sitting at the other end. I thought that was a perfect arrangement. So I asked if he would please rub my feet. They were right down there by him. As usual, he agreed. And as he began to massage the ache out of my feet, Maggie watched for a minute, and then she said, incredulously, "Does he rub your feet like that every night?" "Yeah, pretty much," I replied. I was surprised at her surprise. Care of a loved one's feet seemed normal to me, an act of familiar kindness and care. It's kind of like how we soothe babies by picking them up and holding them and touching them and using a musical voice and bouncing them up and down. It's like the way that we might hold the hand or stroke the scalp of a loved one who's dying. Touching, soothing, feeding, quenching thirst. This is how human beings show love. And tonight we receive once again the tender farewell of Jesus to us disciples. It comes at first as a shock when Jesus removes his dignified outer garment and dresses himself in a towel as if he were a household servant. He humbles himself as he does that and dignifies us, washing our dusty feet with water. In Jesus' day, foot washing was an act of ritual purity as well as one of comfort and of cleanliness. It was a sign that, like obeying all the other ways that are mentioned in Torah, a sign of belonging to God's people. God's people present themselves with care and cleanliness because it's a necessary condition for approaching God's holiness, even with each other. Tonight, Christ soothes our tired feet, and he washes off the dirt and its stain. We become the guests, we the servants become the guests of the Master. And we know we belong to God's people. You know, what especially amazes me about Jesus' actions is that he's the one about to die. He knows about all those threats mounting against him. And he knows that even in this room, there's one of them who is going to trade him in. And so we would expect Jesus is the one to be cared for. This is his last night with the disciples. We would expect that because he's the one about to die. Might he not need us disciples to reassure him that his teaching and his companionship and all that walking from town after town, all that healing and exorcising, might he not appreciate our saying that it was worth it? Might he not want a few hugs and a few loving hands laid on him? I would want that if I knew tonight was my last night with you. Jesus is certainly not oblivious to the controversy that surrounds him. And surely he knows that returning to Jerusalem for Passover is a dangerous time to be there. He's aware that he will be surrounded by jealous enemies and their false accusations. He's aware of all the suffering to which that might lead. He even has realized that Judas has some particular treachery up his sleeve. But here Jesus is, in the rented room, taking care of the disciples, taking care of us. As the eating resumes after the feet are washed, Jesus, fully clothed again, then shares his bread and his wine. But he explains that those who share in it also partake of something more. They will be partaking of the realness of his human life, the flesh of his body and its lifeblood. All of his humanness, all of his aliveness, all of who he has been and is and will be are there on one plate and in one cup that he passes around to them. That's what he wants them to feed on. His living presence in all its fullness, his presence still alive, only now it will be alive in their bodies. This is more than a reassurance. It's a promise to be with them, to assist them, to guide them, to transform them, to unite us all as one. St. Augustine said, as he taught the newly baptized about receiving the bread and wine of Holy Communion, he remarked, "Be what you see, receive who you are." Be what you see, receive who you are. In that first Maundy Thursday and in this one, we recognize tonight a love that is stronger than death, more welcoming than any earthly host, more strengthening than any other meal. Because tonight Christ pours his life into our life, holding nothing back. All that the Father has given him, he pours into us, his power, his faith, his transforming love especially. So tonight is not about death and sacrifice. It's about our inheriting Christ's grace and Christ's life. That's our bequest. It's about allowing Christ's life to flow into us, through us, beyond us graciously. The same way that God infuses our world with love and care, especially in its wounds. And because we will need God's help in bearing that gift the rest of our lives, and knowing that Jesus cannot much longer guide and comfort us in the flesh, Jesus offered his disciples, us, in prayer to the Father. Though the powers of religion and politics and society are massing around him like a storm cloud, gusting steadily toward him, we are the ones for whom he prays, not for himself. Tonight is a tender farewell, the tender farewell of Jesus, and the giving of a love that is stronger than death. His love, his welcome, our belonging, our inheritance of grace. This is a night when God pulls us in close to wash away the smut and weariness of our journey. And God gathers us close to feast and to be filled with Jesus' fearless grace, so that the world may continue to know the one to whom we all of us, belong. This is how we fulfill Jesus' new covenant, new commandment: love one another as I have loved you.